This is an instructional video that aims to increase the level of awareness and sensitivity to the needs of persons with disability or PWDs in the 2016 election. May 9, 2016. On this day, every Filipino eligible to vote will exercise his or her right to choose the future leaders of our country, the Philippines. One vote means you are making a stand. PWDs are also part of this political process. But their voices are barely heard, voice of what others consider as an insignificant minority and a burden to society. What we need to do is give them a chance to be heard. It is important to recognize them for what they are capable of doing and not for what they require aid to accomplish. This elections, let's make their vote count. Persons with disability or PWDs. Under Republic Act 10366, persons with disability refer to qualified voters who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in the electoral processes on an equal basis with others. Based on the 2010 census, there are 1,443,000 PWDs, comprising 1.57% of the total population in the country. In the 2013 elections, there were around 365,000 registered PWD voters, but only 22.4% of them, or 82,000, were able to cast their votes. PWDs are hesitant to vote because they are facing a hurdle. They face discrimination in terms of attitude. They are often viewed as victims or objects of pity, burden either on society or on their families and careers, threat to the comfort and safety of others, unable or assumed to be unable to do things, have multiple disabilities. Example, assuming a wheelchair user also has intellectual disability. Childish, special. Such misconceptions are based on insufficient or inaccurate information and can perpetuate inappropriate interactions. Education is key. Identifying the PWDs and knowing how to deal with them will help BEIs perform their tasks better. To have a better understanding of PWDs, we will discuss the two types of disabilities: the manifest disability and the non-manifest disability. The manifest disability refers to people who are paralyzed and need some type of aid to move around, severe developmental disability, a physical difference, missing limbs, motor impairment, while the non-manifest disability refers to people with hearing disorder, speech impediment, people who are blind can appear to be sighted, learning disability may be misinterpreted as lack of intelligence or carelessness. With these in mind, here are some points to consider when interacting with PWDs. Mobility impairment. Mobility impairment refers to conditions that limit a person's coordination or ability to move. Tip number 1. When talking with a wheelchair user, attempt to converse at eye level as opposed to standing and looking down. Tip number 2. Allow them to set the pace when walking or talking. Don't sound condescending towards them. Tip number 3. Ask before giving assistance. Wait for a response. Listen to any instruction the PWD may give. Tip number 4. A wheelchair is part of a PWD's personal space. Do not lean or touch the chair without the user's permission. Tip number 5. Avoid staring. Try a warm smile and initiate a friendly conversation. Tip number 6. The sense of touch, like a pat on the back, a handshake, or a wave, speaks volumes and assures the PWD that you do not consider them untouchable. Deaf. This includes people who are completely deaf or have partial hearing in one or both ears. Tip number 1. If you do not understand, ask the statement to be repeated or written down. Tip number 2. Use a pen and a notepad so that questions or comments may be noted down. Tip number 3. Use appropriate facial expression and hand gestures in order to facilitate communication with a deaf person. Tip number 4. Use a gentle tap on the shoulder or wave your hand to get a deaf person's attention. Tip number 5. Face the person and speak slowly and not in an exaggerated manner. Tip number 6. If you can, learn the art of sign language. Blind. This includes people with no vision or some functional vision, and also includes people who are colorblind and those with eyesight problems related to aging. Tip number 1. When entering a room or joining a conversation, identify yourself. In a group discussion, to avoid confusion, Mention the name of the person to whom a question is being addressed. Lastly, do not walk out of a conversation without informing the blind person that you are about to leave. Tip number 2. The blind can hear. Speak in a normal voice. Address them directly and not their assister. Tip number 3. When giving directions, use terms such as left, right, step up, or step down. Convert directions to the PWD's perspective. Tip number 4. When guiding a blind person, offer your arm and let them take it rather than pulling the person's sleeve. Tip number 5. In guiding the blind person to sit in a chair, hold his or her hand and make him or her touch the backrest of the chair instead of pushing. Developmental disability. Developmental disability has something to do with the way the brain is wired. They are born with certain delays, so they use different ways to learn and function. Tip number 1. Strive to create a quiet haven with only a few well-chosen pictures, charts, and visual stimuli. Tip number 2. Be extra patient. Tip number 3. Take every opportunity to praise the person. Reinforce his or her strengths. Tip number 4. Do not finish sentences for them. Allow them the time to say everything they wish to say. General tips on PWDs. In the voting centers, keep all walkways clear of debris. Make sure everything that is needed for election-related tasks are within reach. Avoid asking personal questions about someone's disability. Let them mention their disability first. If you must ask, be sensitive and show respect. It is better to say person with disability rather than disabled person. To PWDs, don't say disabled, handicapped, invalid, patients, crippled, deformed, defective. Instead, use person with disability or persons with disability. To non-PWDs, don't say normal, healthy, able-bodied. Instead, use person without disability or persons without disability. Wheelchairs are a source of freedom and mobility for people who can't walk or have difficulty with movement or endurance. So instead of using wheelchair bound, use wheelchair user.
lahat ng Pilipinong nasa wastong edad ay may karapatang bumoto at maging bahagi sa lahat ng proseso tungo sa pag-unlad, may kapansanan man o wala. Sa darating na halalan, malaki ang papel na gagampanan ninyong mga BEIs at mga volunteers upang ganap na makilahok ang ating mga kapatid na may kapansanan.